title of this evening is The Elder Brother of the World. So I'm going to basically explore vertical friendship in the Dharma. So it's not really a talk, really. It's kind of just me exploring this term, Lokajesta, which I first heard. I think must have been during when I was doing Mitra study, maybe, or there's a talk that Bhante gave called The Buddha, Man or Superman. And it's in that talk, he might mention it elsewhere, but he mentions this term Lokajesta, which I can't remember how it's normally translated, but Bhante translates it in that lecture as the elder brother of the world. And obviously that's just lodged in my head, and I've been sort of carrying that around for quite a few years now, as just a point of reflection on another way of looking at the Buddha. So I just wanted to kind of draw on that, really. I wanted to kind of explore that, imagine that with you all, and hopefully there's something in there for all of us to, as I said in the kind of sort of promotion for tonight, it was to bring us closer to the Buddha, for us to imagine ourselves a little bit closer to the Buddha, because often, I don't know how you guys feel, but the Buddha is always, he's kind of too far away, he's too great, he's quite abstract, and it's very difficult for me to feel close to him. So hopefully this evening we all feel, if only just a few steps, we feel a little bit closer to the Buddha, which would be a great thing. So yeah, Bhante mentions this term Lokajesta, which means the elder brother of the world. In my head over the years, I've called it the elder brother of the tribe. I'll say more about that in a minute, but that's how I like to think of the Buddha, the elder brother of the tribe. Yeah, and I don't know why it's been a point of fascination for me. I suppose it's because it's something that I really want. I've never had a brother. I've got a sister. So perhaps there's something in that. I wanted an older brother. Maybe something to do with that. But I think it's something to do with the fact that even if we had really good relationships with our fathers, the age of kind of fathers initiating us, or fathers, even becoming an apprentice to your father in the trade that he learned, that kind of age is well and truly over. And even if we have had a very positive relationship with our father, we probably haven't experienced initiation from him, or some of us may have done, but we probably haven't experienced that kind of elder initiating us into manhood. Certainly not as I like to imagine how that would be. So I've been kind of thinking quite a lot about tribes over the years with this term, and the idea of the elders of the tribe taking you away and initiating you, and then returning you to your village, and returning you to your family, and you're born anew. And it's interesting, like Sangajit was talking about our relationship as the Jits, and we've all been through that initiation, ordination being an initiation into a new life. And it's a very, very important thing, and it's something that's absent from conventional life, if you like. And a lot of men or all women don't experience any type of initiation of real value and significance. So to have experienced that, to have been through that with Sangajit and Arijit is a true blessing to me. And it's become more relevant to me, this idea of kind of like the elder brothers of the tribe, because until recently I was the centre manager at Brighton Buddhist Centre, which I left to go and work in a school. So I now work in a secondary school as a mentor to a group of about 10 or so, mainly boys, year 9 boys, all very, very challenging behaviour, coming from situations, all very kind of poor, very chaotic lives, not a very good impression of men, and all of this stuff. And one of the things I've really enjoyed about this work with them is I get to actually explore in my imagination being an elder of the tribe, and being at least relative to a 14-year-old boy, someone who's wiser, more experienced, knows their way around life a bit. And that's been a really amazing thing for me to explore in my work, is this idea of the local jester, the elder brother of the tribe. So in our work, we're kind of teaching them, you know, the real basics, like why it's a good idea not to swear at people, why it's a good idea to, when you walk in a room, say hello, why it's a good idea to have manners, all of these things, teaching them to just, you know, sit down, listen, follow instructions, show respect, all of these really basic things. But it really helps me to get into this archetype, I guess, of the elder of the tribe, or one of the elders of the tribe. So it's a really current theme in my life, which gives me a lot of meaning, and it's always been there since I first heard this term local jester from Bante in his lecture, The Buddha, Man or Superman. And like I said, in a way, it's a way that I get to try, it's a way in for me to imagine the Buddha as being an elder brother, so being in my family, being a little bit older than me, a little bit wiser than me. Obviously the Buddha is a lot more wiser than I am, but it helps me to kind of imagine him a little bit closer to me, and the relationship of the Buddha being our teacher being more of an intimate one, rather than the teacher over here, the Buddha over here teaching the Dharma, me over here receiving it. The elder brother of the tribe, local jester, helps me to move maybe to the front row, and to be able to look at the Buddha's robes and look at the Buddha's feet and look at the Buddha's face. So to bring me closer. So I'm just going to explore kind of some of the things when I think about this term local jester, some of the things that come to mind, some of the stories from the Buddha that come to mind. I'm not going to read any. I was kind of thinking I might read some stuff from suttas, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tell them as stories, and I'm not a very good storyteller, so you have to, hopefully you can imagine these things. But before I do that, I'm just going to share my screen, and I'm going to, hopefully you can see this. Can you see this? Thumbs up if you can see this. Yeah. So this is in the post we had on Facebook. I used this image here. I used the coloured version, but this image, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is an image of a statue of Padmasambhava found in Samye. And I don't think it exists anymore. I think it's been destroyed or lost, or I think this photo was taken, I don't know, maybe in the 50s, I don't know. But what I really love about this photograph of this statue is that, I don't know what the Tibetan name for it is, but it translates as looks like me. And apparently the legend has it that Padmasambhava came across this statue in Samye, and when he saw it, he said, it looks like me, and gave his blessing to this statue as a, I guess, an emanation of Padmasambhava. And it's Padmasambhava, you know, it being called looks like me. When I kind of learned this, it made me really, again, imagine Padmasambhava as somebody who existed, and somebody who taught, and somebody who was your guru, someone who was your master, rather than this fantastical figure that we all know and love. But as fantastic as it is, it sometimes doesn't feel like it's real. And this image here really evokes Padmasambhava as real, as someone who looks like this, someone who actually existed, perhaps only if it's in my imagination. So yeah, I'll stop sharing that. So yeah, I'm going to draw on a few things. And I shared that picture because it's kind of, Padmasambhava is the guru, and the guru is kind of goes one further than the Buddha could. The Buddha was a teacher, a great teacher, but a teacher in the very general sense. And in Bante's lecture, I think it was given on Padmasambhava in 1979, he talks about the Manu, the Buddha, and the Guru. And the Buddha gives a very general teaching to mankind, if you like. But then you need the Guru to give personal teachings to step into your life. And in a way, Maitreya Bandhu is a good example of that, as somebody who stepped into my life, Sangajit's life, and teaches me the Dharma, you know, relating to my actual life that I live in the way that the Buddha's teachings can't, because they were given to mankind, if that makes sense. And it's even more so with Bante. So I'm going to give some examples of this that we find in the suttas, and these are just examples of the Buddha stepping into our life, stepping into the lives of those he met, and helping us to imagine the Buddha as being closer to us. So the first thing that came to mind was the story of Kisa Gotami. So maybe we're familiar with the story of Kisa Gotami. If we're not, I'll give a very, I should ask people, shouldn't I, to give the story of Kisa Gotami, but I won't do that. But Kisa Gotami is an unfortunate woman who experiences the death of her child, and is distraught and goes mad with grief, basically. And yeah, she asks people for help to bring her son back to life. And of course, no one will help her, no one can help her. And she goes from village to village, person to person, maddened with grief. And you can imagine people being quite impatient with her, maybe quite short with her. She just doesn't get it that her son has died. Anyway, she comes across somebody who says, the Buddha will help you. Go and see the Buddha, he'll help you. So she goes to see the Buddha, and there's this famous encounter with the Buddha where the Buddha says he can help her if she can go and get, you know, a mustard seed from a house. And the mustard seed in India being like, you know, everywhere, she thinks, wow, this is great, you know, I'll go and get a mustard seed. He has the specification that it must come from a house that hasn't experienced death. And the story goes that she moves from house to house. Everyone has a mustard seed, but no one has it in a house that hasn't experienced death. And through the repetition of moving door to door, door to door, she comes to, if you like, returns to the Buddha, gives up her son and goes for refuge to the Buddha. This is one of my favorite stories of the Buddha, because it's the Buddha, well, it's the Buddha at his most compassionate and at his wisest, I think, but in a very practical way, meeting somebody in their darkest moment, not giving some sort of general or abstract teaching, giving an actual teaching that can help somebody move past whatever they're experiencing. And it's yeah, for me, it's the Buddha at his most, yeah, just this exquisite kindness and this shattering wisdom. The next thing that came to mind is Sona. So Sona is found in the suttas as somebody who I really relate to. So he's doing walking meditation, and he's outside his kind of hut, I think, and he's just walking up and down, up and down, up and down, like he is hitting the walking meditation very, very hard, 100%, to the point where his feet are bleeding. And the Buddha sees this happening, and again, this quality of the Buddha moving into you as an individual, the Buddha moving in as the guru, the Buddha moving in as the elder brother of the tribe, says to Sona, you were once a lute player. You know, and how do you tune a lute? You don't over tighten the strings because they'll snap. You don't make them too slack because there won't be any sound from them. And meets Sona as this musician, this former musician, meets Sona in a language that he'll understand. There's another quality of the Buddha knowing us as individuals. And that's really important for me, that when I imagine the Buddha who talks to me and teaches me through the Dharma as a teaching for mankind, but I also feel he's teaching me as an individual. And on some level, he knows who I am. And we have the archetypal Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to, in a way, help us with that, help us to feel spoken to directly by the Buddha. So this incident with this event with Sona is very much the Buddha knowing us, knowing who we are, knowing where we've come from, knowing the language we'll understand, and helping us. Then you have Maggia, who is an attendant, is given the absolute honor and privilege of attending to the Buddha, and he basically doesn't want to do his job, which I always find really interesting, that Maggia is this person who is asked to attend to the Buddha for the day or for a couple of days, and he goes off, asks for permission to leave the Buddha to go and get food for both of them, and the Buddha excuses him and says, yeah, you can go and do that. And Maggia goes to the village and collects food, and on his way back he sees this mango grove. He sees this delightful mango grove. You can imagine it's green and luscious, shaded. There's presumably mangoes everywhere, sweet smelling, just this beautiful spot. And he thinks, this is the spot for me. I will meditate here and I will get into some really, really deep meditative states. So he rushes back to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, he asks the Buddha, look, I know I'm meant to be with you all day, but I've really got to get back to this spot. There's this spot I found, and it's going to be the place that's going to really help me in my meditation. And the Buddha refuses Maggia. But on the third time of asking to leave, the Buddha says, he famously says, do what you think it's time for, which I think is such a lovely thing to say to somebody. Do what you think it's time for. So he lets Maggia go. Maggia goes to the mango grove. His mind is overcome with craving, anger, aversion, and he's very confused that in this delightful spot he can still experience a mind full of craving and hatred, and returns to the Buddha, and the Buddha talks to him about friendship. But this is very much the guru, or the elder brother of the tribe, letting us be who we are, acknowledging who we are. And Maitreya Bandhu in his book Journey in the Guide talks about the path of integration being about understanding the creature we are. The Buddha knows who we are as a human being, but he knows who we are as an individual. He knows what we're up to. He knows all of our dark spots. He knows our greatness as well. Yeah, there's a few more, and then I'm gonna finish with something a bit more closer to home. And you've got Dharnia. So Dharnia is another favourite. So Dharnia is this arrogant cattle farmer who has got loads of cows and has got a wife, and he's probably the smuggest person in the Pali Canon, I think. He is somebody who really does believe he's got it sorted. So he's a cattle farmer, so he's got a lot of cattle. He's got this nice hut. He's got a wife that cooks the rice, and he's at the end, well, I imagine him at the end of the day feeling like everything's tidied away, everything's good, and a knock comes at the door, and it's the Buddha asking for somewhere to stay. And Dharnia just launches into this kind of, I imagine it in my head as like a sort of rap. He starts sort of rapping at the Buddha, like, I've made it. I'm just the king here. And the Buddha really raps back at him and says, no, you're not. And they sort of go at it. But what I love about this sutta is that the Buddha is in his home. And I just love that idea of the Buddha being actually in your home with your family, with all of your stuff. Anyway, this goes on. And again, rather predictably, maybe Dharnias comes to his senses and goes for refuge to the Buddha. But I'd recommend you checking that out, the Dharma Sutta, if you suffer from pride and arrogance. Then you have case of dysentery. So this is Bhante gives a lecture on this, one of my favorite lectures, of a sick monk who has dysentery, and because he's no longer useful to his fellow monks pretty much abandon him, and the Buddha finds this monk in a hut at the point of death from dysentery. And what I find really interesting about this is that rather than going and chastising the monks, the Buddha takes care of him. So he fetches water with Ananda, and he washes the monk, cleans the monk, redresses him. So you get this real encounter, real intimacy between yourself and the Buddha as your teacher, the Buddha as your guru, the Buddha as your Lokajesta, your elder brother. It's a really beautiful sutta, and Bhante gives a really good recount of it in his lecture called A Case of Dysentery. I really recommend you check that out. And then lastly, you get Vakali. So Vakali is somebody who falls in love with the Buddha. And so Vakali goes for refuge to the Sangha. He actually becomes a monk for reasons basically that he's in love with Buddha, and he just wants to be around the Buddha because he's actually in love with the Buddha. I don't think there's much inspiration towards practicing the Dharma or even living a sort of monastic life or the life of a wandering monk. It seems to me that Vakali becomes a monk because he's actually in love with the Buddha. And I love this story because it's the story of, the Buddha moving into a mode which is quite strong. So yes, Vakali is infatuated with the Buddha and just spends all his time just looking at the Buddha. He's at the front of every time the Buddha teaches, Vakali's at the front gazing at the Buddha, follows him everywhere, just looks at him. And the Buddha gets fed up and sends Vakali away and tells him to go away, sort of banishes him. And Vakali is absolutely heartbroken. But again, it's that idea of that vertical friendship, cutting through when it needs to cut through. And definitely that has been my experience of the vertical friendships I have really saved me at times, because they've been able to actually cut right through to what needs to be said and when it needs to be said. And this is the Buddha very much in that mode of how he approaches Vakali. So those are a few bits from the Pali Canon. So maybe you've written some of them down. So there's Kisa Gotami, there's Sona, there's Meghiya, there's Dharniya, there's the Case of Dysentery, and there's Vakali. There must be hundreds of other instances of the Buddha as the elder brother moving in a very intimate, personal way. But we can go even better than this, and we can look at Maitreya Bandhu's poem, The Travellers of Orissa. So The Travellers of Orissa is a poem in Maitreya Bandhu's book of poems called Yarn. And in that book, instantly, you'll find a poem called The Cattle Farmer's Tale, which is a retelling of the Dharniya Sutta, which is absolutely incredible. So do go out and buy a copy of Yarn. We don't do this all the time where we just publicize Maitreya Bandhu, but it is amazing. The Cattle Farmer's Tale is amazing. But there's also this other poem called The Travellers of Orissa. So I'm just going to finish with some of my reflections on that. there is a Sanghajit sent me a video of Maitreya Bandhu reading the poem "The Travellers of Rissa," which perhaps somebody could post here. Oh, there you go. But it's an amazing poem. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's so good, I actually accept it as a sutta, in the same way that Bante's short story, The Cave, I accept that as a sutta. I don't think of that as a story that Bante made up. I actually accept that as a sutta. The Travellers of Rissa is very much the same thing. And it talks about the two early disciples of the Buddha, Tapussa and Balaka. So they first encounter the Buddha directly after his enlightenment, and they are supposedly the first people to sort of look after the Buddha and give him food and give him his first meal after the enlightenment. So they pop up and then they disappear and they're never heard of again in the suttas. So what Maitreya Bandhu has done is to imagine what happens to those two that met the Buddha just after his enlightenment. And this is kind of the key point around Loka Jester and the elder brother of the tribe, the elder brother of the world, is that we are like free to imagine the Buddha however we like. And that particularly now relates, we live in a time where we're actually free to imagine Bante however we like. You no longer have to get in touch with his secretary to go and meet him. You can just meet him whenever you like, and you're free to imagine him however you like. You can imagine him in his yellow robes with that classic painting we're all familiar with. You can imagine him however you like. So this is Maitreya Bandhu taking up that right in a way to imagine the Buddha however you like. So he imagines the story of Tapussa and Balaka, and there's a couple lines that I wanted to end with, which for me sum up the intimacy of friendship, both horizontal and vertical, but sum up the intimacy, particularly of vertical friendship, and how within vertical friendship, for me personally, it's my main way of engaging with the Dharma. And when I can engage with it, it's like electric. It's like there's so much energy, and I think if we don't really kind of look at vertical friendship, if we think we can do without it, I feel like we're really missing out on an opportunity to move from looking at the teacher, the Buddha, for example, as this person who gave a general teaching to humankind. We're missing out on the opportunity to meet the guru, to meet the person who teaches you in your life, teaches you as a person, not as a human being, but you as you. And in that relationship, that vertical relationship, is a huge amount of energy that I think it'd be great if we could all tap into more. So I'm going to read a couple lines and I'm going to talk about them a bit and then we'll finish. So in the story, so Maitreya Bandhu, and do go away and read it or listen to it on YouTube. It is just truly wonderful. But it's told in the voice of Balaka. And Balaka tells the story of when him and Tapussa first met the Buddha. And then time passes, years pass. You don't get any sense that they ever met the Buddha again. They met the Buddha once. It was amazing, and then they got on with their life, it seems. And Balaka talks about that moment when or that time when he met the Buddha, and he says, he talks about how I had laughed and touched the master's arm, kissed his feet, then wept when it was time to leave. How I had laughed and touched the master's arm, kissed his feet, then wept when it was time to leave. And that line is the sheer intimacy of vertical friendship in the Dharma. And it reminds me of my friend Demarco was talking once about, he used to practice Aikido, and they were doing bokken drills with their wooden swords. And he said they were all sat down and they would just do this for hours with their wooden swords. And then his sensei came along and just, I'll get my arm on camera. Anyway, he just touched his arm. His sensei just touched his arm like that and just moved ever so slightly down. And DeMarco said that was the first time in his life that he ever felt initiated by another man. And this line, how I had laughed and touched the master's arm, kissed his feet and wept when it was time to leave, really evokes the intimacy of being a disciple of the Buddha at the time of those original disciples. He wasn't some far removed figure. He was an actual person that taught you the Dharma, that you touched and that you were around and that spoke to you about your life, was maybe interested in your life. So that's him, Balaka, talking about this meeting in the past. And then Balaka hears that the Buddha is in town, the Buddha's nearby. He's going to be somewhere in 3 days' time, and he decides to go. His son, Megia, who we heard about earlier, insists that they go and see the Buddha. So they walk off, and you get this sense that perhaps they walked for days to meet the Buddha. And there's all of this noise and commotion. You can imagine all these people gathering around the Buddha. You can imagine Balaka and his son at the back, maybe sort of can't quite see the Buddha. Anyway, it's over. The Buddha gives a teaching, and then this happens afterwards. There he was, the master, walking a little way ahead with a motley crew of sadhus and disciples. I knew him by the way he moved, slow and even, like an elephant or tiger. Megia didn't notice him at first, but I said, "Master," before I even knew I spoke. I'd never used the name before. He turned and said my name, Balaka, he said. So soft, I felt ashamed. I wept so hard, I thought my ribs would break. He said, "Good," then carried on his way. And yeah, this is for me again charged with this energy that is contained within vertical friendship. Again, it's a very intimate passage of Balaka knowing it's the Buddha by the way he walked, the familiarity with the way the Buddha moved, slow and even. And just this moment of the Buddha calling you by your name, if you can imagine it, what a thing to imagine, the Buddha knowing you, calling you by your name, and that speaks to you so deeply that you burst into tears. And then the Buddha carries on his way. So I'll leave it there. It's a good place to leave. Yeah, and hopefully that kind of, well, there's a lot of there for you guys to pick up on. There's a lot of kind of stuff there in the Pali Canon. There's this wonderful poem by Maitreya Bandhu called The Travellers of Orissa and The Cattle Farmer's Tale. But yeah, hopefully it helps us go away and look around us and see the opportunity for friendship, not necessarily vertical friendship, but see the opportunity, yeah, for horizontal friendship generally. We don't even have to label it, but particularly this kind of the friends above our head, the friends who are a little bit further on than us, the friends that are like the elder brother, and see if we can yeah, foster that intimacy that we find in all of these suttas, and especially in this poem, The Travellers of Orissa. So we'll leave it there.